Welcome to the 28storms.com tropical weather update on this late Friday evening, September 16th. Hurricane Maria is now extratropical in nature, so the final advisory from the National Hurricane Center has been written, and we no longer have any active tropical systems in the Atlantic Basin. However, we do have a series of tropical waves exiting the coast of Africa, and one has already been called Invest 97L. This is now being given a 20% chance of development over the next 48 hours. Also in this video, we will quickly discuss what is occurring in the Eastern Pacific. We haven't really talked about the Pacific all that much over the last few weeks since activity has calmed down quite a bit, but the National Hurricane Center is giving a small disturbance here off the coast of Mexico a 20% chance of development. That is really unlikely to develop, but I really think that the focus needs to be on this upcoming tropical disturbance currently to the south of El Salvador and Guatemala. I would say that this has a fairly high chance of developing at some point within the next 5 days. But first, turning back toward the Atlantic, we see that much of the basin is relatively calm for now in the wake of Hurricane Maria. We see that the Gulf really doesn't have much of any convection at this current time. There is some convection across the central and western Caribbean, but if we turn on the water vapor, you will find that this is mainly upper level in nature, so we're not expecting any tropical development from that feature. And we have another much more powerful upper level low beginning to make its way over Puerto Rico, and this is generating a lot of strong vertical southwest wind shear over the Lesser Antilles and into the central Atlantic. But if we turn our focus a little bit more toward the east, we can begin to tell that the upper level environment is a lot more favorable here just to the west of the Cape Verde Islands. We do have some strong westerlies associated with this trough that runs from east to west, but that's at a fairly high enough latitude to where we can still get development between 10 and 15 degrees north latitude. Now, this is the latest enhanced infrared of the coast of Africa, and here's that vigorous tropical wave that just left the coast. This is now Invest 97L, so the Hurricane Center is paying close attention to it. However, the good news is that convection is still rather disorganized at this current time, so any development is likely to be slow, at least over the next 24 to 36 hours. But if we look at the water vapor, this does appear to be a fairly good pattern for development. We see a fairly good easterly fetch in the mid to upper levels coming out of Africa. That is a positive indicator for development. And once again, we do have a lot of westerly winds here between 15 and 20 degrees north latitude. But if that remains just to the north of the system or begins to shift back more toward the north, then we should continue to have fairly good conditions for tropical development here to the west of the Cape Verde Islands. Also, this is a quick animation of the daytime visible and overnight shortwave infrared image of the eastern Atlantic. And we can see our tropical wave quite well. If anything, it does appear to have a weak low-level circulation, but it's still a bit displaced to the southwest of the primary convection. Also, very quickly, if anyone is wondering about the current state of the sea surface temperatures across the basin, you can tell that just about the entire hurricane zone is still favorable. We have water temperatures well in excess of 80 degrees Fahrenheit across much of the deep tropics. And before we begin to review some of the most recent model analysis, we'll take a quick look at the Eastern Pacific. There's that tropical disturbance that the Hurricane Center is currently monitoring, although it really doesn't look like this one is going to develop. But if we turn our attention more toward the south here, once again to the south of Guatemala, we do have a very weak tropical disturbance, but there are several indications that it may develop into the next named storm. We haven't had a named storm out here in the Eastern Pacific since mid-August, but it looks like that will change over the next 4 to 5 days. This is a quick look at the daytime visible. You can make out that it already has a very weak low-level surface circulation, and the latest water vapor image reveals that this system has a pretty good envelope of favorable conditions to take advantage of. So I am willing to bet that we will soon see Tropical Storm Hilary in the Eastern Pacific. Starting off with the 12Z run of the Canadian CMC model, we see that it quite clearly develops a tropical storm here to the south of Mexico, and by day 5 and day 6 it looks like it could be a potential threat to land. That will be something that we will reevaluate in tomorrow's video. And if we go ahead and loop this one more time, you will see that it's also developing 97L to the south of the Cape Verde Islands. So far, though, the good news is that the model is indicating that there will be a weakness in the ridging over the central Atlantic, and that would pretty much guarantee that it would recurve. Switching over to the 18Z run of the GFS, we also see development once again here to the south of Mexico, and by day 6 and day 7 it's still sitting just to the south of the Mexican Riviera, and it still shows some potential to possibly threaten land down the road in the medium range. And also compared to the CMC, we see an additional tropical storm being shown in this model. If we go ahead and loop it again, we see that 97L Invest will gradually get its act together, although this does seem a little suspect with it reorganizing itself a little bit more toward the southwest. And the second tropical system that you see here is actually yet another tropical wave that the model is forecasting to exit the coast of Africa. So we will closely be monitoring the central and eastern Atlantic over the coming week. And finally, perhaps the most realistic solutions are stemming from the 12Z run of the ECMWF model. As we go into 24, 48, and 72 hours, we see that the model is not developing the Eastern Pacific storm quite as fast, and it's also showing a slower evolution of the development of 97L Invest. But by day 4, and especially day 5, you really begin to see that Eastern Pacific storm begin to take off. This is more than likely a tropical depression, or possibly even a tropical storm already by this point. And much like the GFS, we see not only one but two potential storms out here in the central and eastern Atlantic. This would be 97L Invest, and this is the second tropical wave that is forecast to exit the coast. But much like the CMC, the European is showing a weakness in the ridge, especially by day 6, day 7, and day 8. So both of these storms are recurving in the model and would pose no threat to land if this were to verify. So it is looking fairly likely that we will soon have Tropical Storm Ophelia in the eastern or central Atlantic. The good news is that anything that does develop within the basin over the next week seems to be pretty far from land. There's really no indication of any Caribbean or Gulf development at this time. And meanwhile, it looks like we will soon have Tropical Storm Hillary, and Hillary could pose somewhat of a threat to the Mexican coast within the medium and extended range. So stay tuned to 28storms.com. We will have more video updates throughout the weekend, and of course, if you're on the road or on the go, you can check out the videos in the Hurricane Tracker app available on iPhone and iPad.